What is the moral case for capitalism? Hello, welcome to Dangerous Policy, a channel aimed at intelligent people wanting to discuss important issues facing life and society. My name is Crispin, and today I'm going to explain why capitalism is by far and away the best economic model, not just for the generation of wealth, but in terms of well-being for each individual living in it. The word capitalism is a bit of a misnomer. It was coined by Karl Marx as part of his class division, the chattel classes, if you like, those that control the means of production, or capital, as opposed to the proletariat who do not. Whereas capitalism, as we use it in everyday speech, means free market enterprise. And the reason for it is to solve a fundamental economic problem. That is that we have, as human beings, unlimited wants and desires, but we live in a universe with limited resources. So how do we allocate these resources in the most efficient way so the most number of wants can be met, but also invested in a way that allows us to generate more resources to ever expand overall abundance. Now, abundance is a key word here because in capitalism, only in capitalism, has the total pie increased to the point at which global poverty worldwide is almost eradicated. 150 years ago, the world population was about 1 billion people. It has exploded in that time to over 7 billion. And throughout most of human history, thousands of years, when there has been a population explosion, it's often coincided with significant deteriorations in standards of living because there are more mouths to feed, which means you need to generate more calories. And if something goes wrong, then the human cost is immense. Whereas despite this population explosion, even the staunchest critics of capitalist systems must acknowledge that the only reason, the sole reason for poverty reduction worldwide has been free market economics. If we look at China, it was only after Deng Xiaoping opened up the economy after the disastrous famines of the Cultural Revolution that those living standards in China began to rise to the point where, in the 1970s, some 80-90% of the population was living in poverty. And today, in just a few decades, less than 1% of people in China are living below the global poverty line. That is hundreds of millions of people lifted out of poverty because of the efficient distribution of resources. I was looking at this in comparison to communism in the 20th century. And to do that, I looked at famines. So there were 19 major famines by my account in the 20th century. Don't ask me what defines major, except for the fact it's immense human suffering. And of those, at least 11 were communist countries, remembering that only 22 communist countries existed in the 20th century. So 11 of those were communist countries and the rest were civil wars. So Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge, Indonesia with Sukarno and Suharto and the like, sub-Saharan Africa. That made up the entire rest of the list. So the only way outside of civil conflict that people will starve to death is because of communism and not living in free market capitalist societies. And then people say, oh, that's not real communism. Communism is a utopia. Well, the communist utopia, let's say, as articulated in Sir Thomas More's book, Utopia, in the 16th century, that's often held up as a communist utopia, where everyone is working in accordance with their means and everyone is receiving goods according to their need. But that utopia is impossible to achieve because people aren't acting in their own self-interest. And people look at the term self-interest in capitalism as a sort of pejorative, but that's not true. There are plenty of things that you do in your own self-interest that are moral goods. For example, eating healthy is in your own self-interest, but that's also beneficial to the society. It means that you're healthier to work, it's healthier for your family, it puts less burden on the health system. The best example is probably education, where getting educated is in your interest because you become more worldly, more knowledgeable, but also a far more productive worker. And that also leads to greater production of resources and capacities in industry and business for the rest of society. It's a mutual benefit. So acting in your self-interest is not the same as being selfish or being greedy or being short-term in your thinking. It's actually thinking about your long-term best interest. And to that end, there is such a thing as a capitalist utopia as well. A capitalist utopia is one in which you create such abundance that even the poorest people within that society do not need to work if they don't want to. That might sound a bit strange, but this is actually the true Star Trek utopia. I've seen terrible articles from people that claim that it's a communist utopia. That is absolutely not the case. In Star Trek, communism is definitely used as a warning. What Star Trek is that point at which they have managed to produce such abundance that there is no poverty, there is no starvation, there is no want or need. Everybody has all of their needs taken care of because of the economic generation that capitalism has enabled. So a good example of this would be minimum wage. Imagine everybody at the bottom earned $1 million a year, okay? The people at the top are earning hundreds of trillions of dollars a year. So the disparity between the bottom and the top is eye-watering, right? They're just night and day. The people at the very top can send probes to Mars and explore the galaxy like we're seeing that happen today. Whereas even at the very bottom, everyone is able to live perfectly affluently. They can go on holidays. They can invest in their children's education. They can spend time developing the skills that are most suitable to them. They can become great pianists or poets. Anything that is within their human capacity they can realize, much like in the Star Trek utopia. The cost of that is inequality. And so there is inequality in capitalist societies. Certainly that is true in the United States, where 1% of the population controls 40% of the national wealth, while the bottom 80% of Americans, some 240 million people, control just 7% between them. And there's something innately unfair that seems about that equation, because surely the people at the very top aren't working so hard or doing such a great contribution to the total wealth that justifies the financial reward that they're receiving relative to that person that's working 3 jobs, still can't make ends meet. But that is the problem of capitalism not realizing its potential through ossification of social hierarchy, of inefficient allocation of resources, through perversion of economic policy. But the actual results on a global level cannot be denied. I mean, just in the last 30 or 40 years, very few people today are dying of starvation. Infant mortality is falling to eye-watering lows. And going back, 150 years, 1 in 2 children would be dead by the age of 5. This is just such a different world we're living in today, and the only result of that is capitalism. So yes, we absolutely should ensure that if people are left behind by capitalism, if people lack the opportunities to realize their potential, understand that that is actually an inversion of capitalism because we're not fully utilizing their potential. If someone would be outstanding at creating like a new form of motorized transport, but they're too busy driving an Uber because they are unable to get the time to actually work on their invention. Well, that is a cost to our society, right? So what that problem is an inefficient distribution of resources, not capitalism itself. So we do need to work on those things that create these perverse incentives that limit people's potential to realize their potential. But capitalism itself is the only emancipation that we have. And so we shouldn't be criticizing capitalism. What we should be doing is looking at expanding opportunity, making sure that capital and resources most efficiently migrate to those that can allocate them the most efficiently. So those that are entrepreneurs, those that have great ideas, those who add value to the total abundance, so we can realize that utopia. So yes, even 500 years from now, where everybody is wanting for nothing, there will still be massive inequality in this capitalist utopia. The difference is that people at the very bottom won't be starving, and they will be able to reach those highest echelons because of rapid social mobility and the opportunity enabling them to succeed. Now, before I wrap this up, I just want to say that even today, things are looking pretty great. I mean, for $10 or less, you can get the entire works of Beethoven. You can listen to it on incredible speakers that makes it feel like you're right there. And if you're watching this video right now, try to imagine how privileged you would seem to a king in the Middle Ages. Henry V, one of my favorite all-time monarchs, died of dysentery at the age of 35. We are all incredibly lucky. We can get on a chair and fly through the sky and be on the other side of the world in less than 24 hours. And this is not something that is just, restricted to Elon Musk. Anyone on a middle-class income in a Western society can do this on a regular basis. We all naturally compare ourselves to the furthest point on the distribution curve. And if we do that and say, look, how would we get from where we are to them? Yeah, it can seem really unfair. But just imagine for a moment that you yourself were living in the same place, the same society 100 years ago. How much more difficult would life be? And the only difference between you and that person 100 years ago is the capitalist revolution. Keep that in mind. If you found value in this discussion, please hit the like button, subscribe to us if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much.